So I'm going to use a utility knife or an X-Acto knife, also known as a hobby or craft knife. When using either one of these, I want to make sure that I am very careful because the blades need to be very sharp so that they'll actually cut through the cardboard. So with the utility knife, I have a switch on the top of it that allows me to push the blade out and then also to retract the blade. And the cutting edge on this is actually down here. And I want to be very careful not to touch that, very careful of where my fingers are. But if I'm cutting cardboard, I can do that very quickly using the utility knife. If I'm standing up, it's easy for me to kind of pull the knife across the cardboard, making sure that this hand's not in the way. So I can easily cut through the cardboard. Now I didn't go all the way through because the cardboard is thick. So I should be able to go through the cardboard in at least 2 passes. If I have to do 3 or 4 or 5 passes, then my knife is not sharp. And if I'm tearing the cardboard instead of cutting through it, it definitely is not sharp. So I can actually cut cardboard very quickly and pretty straight using this technique. And this is great if I want some random pieces. The utility knife is also really good for cutting really simple curves. And I can actually just kind of curve my hand as I cut. And if I press with a pretty good amount of pressure, I can get almost all the way through. If I don't go all the way through, that's okay, but I just went back and was able to cut that last little bit. So that quickly I can get some pieces cut that I can use in some random sculpture. And then I'm going to take these longer pieces and cut them into some smaller, more random pieces. Okay, so that quickly I can cut a bunch of random pieces. Let me talk about cutting something a little bit more intricate, a little bit smaller, and in that case I want to actually use my X-Acto knife. Again, I want it to be very sharp. A sharp knife actually cuts a lot easier than a dull knife. And just like my utility knife, my cutting edge is down here. I'm going to hold this very much like a pencil, but I want to hold it pretty straight up and down because I'm cutting through nice thick cardboard. So first of all, I drew a circle using a compass, and I made sure to mark my center. That way, I'm going to use this a little bit later to do another technique. So when I cut cardboard, I don't want to try to cut one big stroke. I'm actually going to cut a little bit. I'm going to kind of start up here near the top, and I'm going to cut through. Actually, I'm going to try to cut all the way through the cardboard. It's going to make it a lot easier. So I'm using quite a bit of pressure, but I cut a little bit, and then I'm going to pick up the whole knife and piece of cardboard and turn it. And that way my knife, I try not to pick it up out of the cardboard, and that's going to keep the cut nice and even and smooth so that that cardboard's going to pop out. So again, I pick it up and turn it. Now I do want to be careful if I'm cutting some really small intricate curves, because it can become pretty difficult because the cardboard is pretty thick. But a nice large circle like this is pretty easy to cut with my X-Acto knife. If it was any bigger, I could cut it with my utility knife. Now I can flip it over and look at the back to see if I've cut all the way through. If I didn't cut all the way through, then I can take my utility or my X-Acto knife and actually cut through, but I think I went all the way through and it pops out. Sometimes you want to actually measure and cut a piece of cardboard to a very specific size. So here I have a piece of cardboard that actually has 3 straight edges, and then this edge isn't so straight, so I'm not going to use that edge. So when I measure, I'm actually going to use these 2 edges so that I only have to make 2 cuts, and it actually is going to save me a lot of time and a lot of headache. This side's a little rough, so I'm not going to use that side. So I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler, and I'm going to measure 6 inches from this side, and then I'll do a 9-inch piece. So I have to be careful with my ruler because this right here is the 0. The edge of my ruler is not the 0. So I line up that, I come in, and I want to go ahead and do 6 inches. Okay, I'm going to come up here. Now I want to make at least 2 marks at the 6, but I like to do 3 marks. 3 marks actually helps me make sure that it's really going to be 6 inches wide all the way across. Okay, so I line up those 3 marks. I'm going to go ahead and cut it now, and then I can measure my 9-inch side. Okay. Alright, so I line up my ruler, and I want to be really careful of my fingers. I don't want to cut my fingers, so I'm really spreading my fingers out, putting a lot of pressure on my fingers so that ruler doesn't move. And I'm actually not using a whole lot of pressure. Since I'm cutting a straight line, it's okay if I need to cut 2 or 3 times to go all the way through. If I take my time, I'll get a nice even cut, and I'm not going to hurt myself. Okay, so I'm going to measure. This was my better edge. So I'm going to measure in 9 inches from there. And I'm just going to do this 3 times like I did before. So this will come in very handy if I really need to build a box that's a very specific size. And then that way I can cut all my sides to the exact measurements. Okay, line up my 3 marks and do like I did before. And there I have a 6x9 rectangle. When it comes to gluing cardboard, I just like to use white glue. A lot of people want to use hot glue, but it actually takes a lot longer and it's a little bit more expensive. So I'm going to use white glue. I use a paintbrush with a little bit of glue on a plastic lid, and I'm going to just get some of my random pieces that I used earlier, that I cut earlier, and I'm going to glue them onto something I've already started. So here I've just been stacking some random pieces, and I've been kind of trying to pay attention to the way the corrugation runs, and I can stack it. If I wanted to, I could cut a bunch of pieces that were the exact same size and create a big column of them, but I can twist them, I can turn them, I can have them run in different directions. They can get bigger, they can get smaller, but there I have the beginnings of a stacked sculpture. I have a piece of cardboard here that I cut a shape out of, and so this is sort of like my base shape, and I'm going to cut a smaller shape that's going to go on top of this. So I've got my other blank piece of cardboard here, and I can just go ahead and trace either this, but easier yet is to use my cutout. This is my negative space. So if I set this down, I can actually draw it smaller inside of it. So the idea of a topography, if we think of a topography as far as mapping is concerned, is that it kind of creates a hill or shows the elevations. So it gets a little bit smaller. So it's kind of like rings inside of one another. So I just sketched that out, and then I would go ahead and I would take my X-Acto knife and I would just cut that out, and then I'd glue it on top, and I would keep getting smaller and smaller. I actually have already started this one. Okay, so this shape is that shape there, and then that's going to go ahead and get glued down to this side, I believe. Okay, and I'm just going to take my glue, and I really want to spread the glue out to the edge using a lot of glue. And then I'm going to stick it down, position it, and then I'm just going to kind of hold it down kind of tightly for a little while, and then set it aside to dry. So now I have my topography that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels high. Now the nice thing is, if I use all the same size cardboard, I can actually do the negative of that. So I actually have a sixth piece of cardboard underneath to kind of create that bottom level, and that becomes the negative of that one. So I could go ahead and glue all of these together as well and keep them nice and straight.